Elon Musk is the Thomas Edison of our time. We've never seen 15 technologies evolving at the same time the way they are. 5 major innovation platforms. He's involved in all of these companies that are spewing out orthogonal kinds of data that no one else has. We are so privileged to be living in this time.
Larry and Cathie just sat down for one of the most fun interviews I've ever listened to. And it's going to be fun because it's going to be a 2-parter where you'll see an interview and then you'll see a conversation. It was very eye-opening for me specifically because we've seen Cathie on CNBC, we've seen Cathie on a bunch of podcasts, but I thought the entire conversation you had with Cathie really brought out a side of her that I've never seen before. Her experience from years ago through her life of discovering macro trends that were game-changing in society. This is not new for her. This has been something she's been doing her whole life. And the parallels of hearing her life story versus what's happening now was extremely eye-opening in this conversation.
You know, we're in a moment right now. And the moment is Cathie's either right and this thing's going to explode.
Yeah.
Or she's wrong. And we're in a very tough financial situation. I think she's right.
Yeah, me too.
And she's done this before. She's been successful at this before. And that comes out in the conversation. I mean, she's a maverick, but one whose message is extraordinarily important and whose life story is therefore very important.
Yeah.
You know, because it reflects this opportunity and this moment and, you know, the risks we face and the opportunities we have. So I've been on many, many, many brainstorms with Cathie. I've understood the intellectual power behind her, but I haven't heard her story, you know. And so it's such a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's what fascinates me about mavericks. They come from so many different walks of life.
Yeah.
And the importance of them is, you know, that they can make a difference to our lives on a massive scale.
Yeah.
So for me, it was this was like, you know, coming to a very important moment in my meetings of people, in my experience of people.
It's almost like a pilgrimage.
It's a pilgrimage.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And it's I think the audience is really going to love this conversation. And I think I almost want to say, let's shoot it over to the conversation because it was just so wonderful. One of the coolest podcasts I personally have had the pleasure of watching, and I got to watch it in person. And I was right there.
It was so much fun actually coming here to St. Petersburg with Farzad and watch his eyes open as he saw the beautiful town.
Oh my God.
Such fun.
We're moving to St. Petersburg. Here we go. All right. Here are Larry and Cathie.
I love Larry. I mean, Larry coming, you add so much to our brainstorm.
Thank you.
You do. I mean, you are authoritative when you say something. I understand it and believe it. So, and I love it when you disagree with us, any one of us. I think that's the most important contribution.
The quality of the people in the brainstorm, I was telling Farzad about it, the quality of the people in the brainstorm are just blow away. I mean, it's just such a privilege to be amongst people who each of them brings so much to the table.
Yeah.
It's just extraordinary what you've done. I mean, just putting that together is just extraordinary. It's just for us, it's a blessing.
Whenever, no matter where in the world I am, even when I'm on vacation, which in April, hopefully I will be, in Japan, I will tune in.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, because the world's moving so quickly.
I know.
You know,
it's
and it's so exciting.
You know, where the world started for me in the Maverick Mind. You know, thinking about the Maverick Mind, I'm a student of Edison and have, you know, studied him in great detail, which really brought me in a way to Elon and the Musk world. I'm convinced that these massive movements of technology are really inspired by people.
Absolutely.
And I call those people mavericks because they go against the grain. They decide that what is not sufficient and there has to be something more.
Right. You know, it's so interesting. In 2015, we had just started ARC and somehow we got on Carol Masser's show on Bloomberg. And I remember trying to communicate to her at the time about Elon Musk. And Tesla was a shadow of what it is right now. And I actually said, Elon Musk is the Thomas Edison of our time. And here I'm feeling we probably had $100 million under management, right? Almost nothing. And I walked out, I said, I hope I'm right on that, because it just came out naturally. It wasn't anything I had ever said before. And that's often what happens. Actually.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever studied Edison's life, but he was in the center of, this second industrial revolution.
Definitely.
And his patents or his discoveries, his inventions, really are the pattern of that era and of what was the substance of that revolution.
Yes.
So he may not have been the inventor of everything he invented, but he certainly brought those to the market in many ways the way Elon has.
Yes.
And so, that brought the magic of what followed in terms of our industrial expansion. And I think we're probably going to see the same thing. And that's the thesis, I think,
Yes. And what's so interesting about that time, and we do look at that as the last time we went through something like we're going through now, it took global real GDP growth, those sets of inventions, from what Brett Winton, our chief futurist, in consultation with academia, believes was 0.6% real GDP growth for 400 years to 3%, a 5-fold acceleration in the growth rate Elon is doing now, and other inventors, but certainly Elon leading the charge. We believe is going to more than double real GDP growth, which many people think is crazy. They can't imagine real GDP growing 7-8%. And yet it's nothing like the 5-fold increase. We think it's conservative.
Yeah, and it is truly remarkable what these evolutions, these revolutions have done in terms of GDP growth. I often worry about the population implosion as being a negative impact on that. And I'm wondering whether or not that will reverse or whether or not that will impact. I don't know if Brett's factored that into his calculations. It'd be very interesting to me.
I think there is a demographic depressant on it. But something is even changing there. And you can say Elon might be leading this charge too. But, I have been in the business for a very long time and have been at many small gatherings where we introduce ourselves to all the people there. Only in the last 6 months, I'm going to say, have I heard people introducing themselves around the table and talking about how many children they have.
That's interesting.
It is.
So you think there's a reversal?
I think there is.
That would be very hopeful.
Yes.
That would be very hopeful.
Yes.
So, Cathie, at the Maverick Mind, we're not only interested in these things that are happening around us, but we're interested in the people who are making them happen. And so that brings me to you. I mean, you're truly a maverick. I mean, in your industry and beyond your industry, you're not only a spokesperson for this innovation that's happening, but you're driving the innovation yourself. And so what has driven me to this series is my interest in the people themselves. So tell me a little bit about where do you come from? I know you've got Irish blood in you.
Definitely.
But tell me a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up? Where did you arise from? Whence did you arise?
Yes. Well, I want to thank you very much for including me among the group of Maverick. And I agree in a certain way. Certainly other people think of me that way. Certainly in our business they do.
Yes.
And yes, so my roots. I was born of Irish parents, but they were born in Ireland and immigrated independently to the U.S. when my mom was 18, my dad was early 20s. And they met at an Irish dance,
Wow.
which I don't know if you've seen the movie Brooklyn, but it's a little bit like that.
Yeah.
And my father, there's some controversy, but he might have had a high school education. My mother had a high school education. We know that. And education was paramount to them. I mean, as I was raised, I'm the oldest of 4 children. My father raised me as his firstborn son. I really think that's part of, a big part of who I am.
Right.
And, you know, the words he would use, production, you know, he'd come home and production was a big word in our family. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And you're certainly not watching TV. And education, career, to the point where I don't recommend this, but straight A's had to just...
Was required.
Yes. Well, certainly of me.
Oh, yeah.
And
sounds like a Jewish family to me, but
maybe. And straight A's. And then I remember a very important moment in my life. I'd gotten through USC, met Art Laffer there,
right,
who really influenced me enormously, and actually got me into my first position at Capital Group on the West Coast. But after 3 years at Capital, which is an amazing firm, I was focused on economics, got a call from New York. And Frank Sinatra song, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, my family, pioneer spirit, go, you know, whereas I moved to the Northeast and there's such a different dynamic. You know, the families don't want their children to go away. So it's very, very interesting. But it was the early 80s and we had double-digit inflation. We had double-digit interest rates. We were the laughing stock of the world.
Yep.
Productivity was shot. And I remember feeling like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders because we were making one call at Jennison Associates, where I was for 18 years. The one call that was going to change everything was inflation and interest rates have peaked. And we're moving into a period of productivity caused by new technologies.
What drove the idea for that call? You made that call, I think.
So, yes, at that time, just to give you a sense of how long ago that was and how different the world was, we wrote one piece for our clients a quarter. It was a 20-page, single-space, typed tome.
I remember those reports.
Yes, yeah. And I threw my heart and soul into that. And it was really an economics piece around what the Reagan revolution was going to cause.
Wow.
So lower tax rates. I mean, he slashed individual tax rates by 25 percentage points. We were coming from crazy levels. And the Fed, Chairman Volcker, at the same time was strangling inflation out of the system. That's another tax rate. And of course, a good disciple of Art Laffer, I was saying, wow, taxes are coming down dramatically in this country. The PC was being born and actually seemed like it might be useful, although the use cases took a while. It took Microsoft really evolving to really get that productivity kicked in. But all of that was coalescing at the same time. It was very exciting. And I think being young and impressionable and just picking up on all of this was important because most people, the seasoned professionals at that time, they had lived with inflation brewing, and from the mid 60s, 1964,
Right.
Great Society under Lyndon Johnson and the Vietnam War. So guns and butter. And it had been brewing. And then we went off the gold exchange standard in 1971. We closed the gold window. And then all hell broke loose with inflation and interest rates. So it had been 15 to 20 years that these seasoned professionals had been dealing with this problem. And they just didn't think it was going to change because Henry Kaufman, these are names maybe you know, maybe you don't know.
I know them very well.
Okay, Henry Kaufman, Al Wojnauer, Gary Wenglowski. Of course, most people know Milton Friedman. At that time, they were saying inflation is ingrained in the system. Get used to it. It's double digit. Just work with it. And at that time, I was in my early 20s. And I was saying, I don't think that's right. And it was fascinating and, just incredible. It was an incredible growth experience to have each one of those people, with the exception of Milton Friedman, come in. And I would debate them in front of our entire portfolio management and research team. And here I was much younger than all of them, but I felt like I knew the way the world was going to work because Art Laffer, in my classes with him, he would start the classes out, well, first of all, with a joke, always, but then with geopolitics and helping us understand what was going on. And he was able to explain it through Keynesian, various theoretical frameworks,
Right.
Keynesian, monetarist, Austrian. So Austrian supply side was what he really believed. But because he was able to describe why Harvard, people coming out of Harvard, very Keynesian, Chicago, monetarist, I was able to place all these people in their schools and then use the arguments that art helped us evolve really and integrate into our own thinking during these little debate sessions. And so many times, I remember they didn't take me seriously because I was very young, meaning the luminaries of the time.
Right.
But our management team, Sig Sigalis, I don't know if that name rings a bell. He was chief investment officer of Jennison Associates. Bob Kiter loved economics. They believed that I knew what I was talking about. And by the way, if I was right, it was going to be great for Jennison. And it was. It was great. We went but for 4 years, and actually 6 years, not until oil prices crashed in 86, did people really begin to believe that the drop in inflation and interest rates was going to be sustainable. But Henry Kaufman himself, I'll never forget the date, August 17th of 1982, it was the first break in his thinking. He was thinking, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Maybe inflation isn't as bad as we think it is. And the market just took off from there.
I remember the date. I remember the time. We just come to the States as a family. I'd come to the States to go to school, high school in 1963, 64. And, so the period you're talking about, I remember like it was yesterday.
Yes.
And the events of it. And, Art Laffer was, for me, a hero. And, it's remarkable. I think he is the one great economist, the single great economist I know who hasn't won a Nobel Prize. I mean, talk about a maverick.
Oh, talk about a maverick. And he's still with us. I speak with him.
I've heard you speak with him.
Yes. Every Employment Friday, we've made that a pact. So we remember to call one another. Do you know, when I moved to New York, I could not say anything about Art Laffer because
Really?
what had happened? We were in the Reagan Revolution, and President Reagan was listening to Art Laffer, cut tax rates dramatically, and the whole thesis around the Laffer curve is if you cut tax rates, tax revenue will go up. Because people will come out of the gray market, the cash society, and start paying taxes. Well, what he didn't count on was that Chairman Volcker would be strangling inflation, throwing us into a massive recession. So tax revenue did not pick up, and we ended up at a 5.5% deficit as a percent of GDP compared to where we are now, 7%.
Right.
But that was during a recession. Nonetheless, everyone said, that theory has just been disproven. And then, of course, we got out of that recession. And the Laffer curve, I think, is very well respected now because it's one of the reasons we ended up in a surplus in the 90s under Clinton/Gingrich.
Right. And really unfortunate that Reagan was followed by George H.W. Bush. It was really an unfortunate moment. But nonetheless, I mean, Clinton/Gingrich renewed our faith, I think, somewhat. Right?
Yes.
So that's an amazing story. I mean, it reminds me of my own grandfather who came from, Eastern Europe, Russia, what is the Ukraine, that area today, to South Africa, also drove his children to education. Every one of them got, a degree.
Yes.
I know my father's youngest brother did his pharmaceutical degree. And then he said, no, I really want to be a doctor. My grandfather said, look, every one of my sons will have a university degree, but not 2 universities. But he actually paid his way through his own medical degree. So,
yeah, just in terms of that period really did form me as a professional, because I learned if everybody is running in this direction, they all believe the same thing. Deficits, it's a little bit like today.
It is.
If everyone's moving in that direction, and there is reason and evidence to start moving in the other opposite direction, that usually pays off big time. And it certainly paid off for Jennison. The next 20 years, that was the heyday of truly active equity management and technology breakthroughs, all starting with the PC, transistor PC, and then the software explosion.
But we see that pattern today, don't we?
Yes.
We see that pattern, and you're probably the leading prophet of it. Do you think that President Trump is the right candidate to be able to do a Reagan revolution? Do you think he's going to be able to carry it off? Feels a little crazy right now.
But remember, it felt crazy back then,
it did.
too.
You're right.
The big difference, the very big difference is, he would talk to Tip O'Neill, and, who was the Speaker of the House, and did try to cultivate relationships on the other side.
Yes.
We're not seeing that now, and I think it's the fault of both sides.
Yes.
But I wouldn't be surprised. If he does start forging some relationships to get the job done. What I find interesting about the tax rate cuts that he is proposing, very wisely, he started with tips, overtime, and Social Security. Think about those demographics. That's not the wealthy. Right, for the most part. It's not the wealthy. So he starts there. And then there are tariffs, which are the equivalent of sales taxes. Yes. Very regressive if they're passed through onto pricing. Although we've seen countries like China devalue so that they wouldn't be passed on in pricing. And I think if we're listening, reading between the lines to the lines that Kevin Hassett is writing and as he's giving interviews, my sense is there is a tax rate reduction towards a flatter tax. President Trump makes wild statements. He thinks we shouldn't have an income tax. We shouldn't have capital gains taxes. And we're not going to get away with those disappearing. But going back a little bit towards where the country started, where tariffs funded our government. We didn't have an income tax in the early days. Right. And now we have the opposite. Maybe there's a little bit of equilibration there, especially around this reciprocity idea. If you, Canada, are taxing milk or putting a tariff on milk of 250%, our milk can't get into Canada for that reason, we're going to do the same. And I think he's going to bring down a lot of tariffs.
Well, I wanted to talk about the subject of tariffs for this reason. I had always had the same view, the classic view of tariffs as being regressive and so on and so forth. But in the conversations of tariffs that I've heard recently, I've found inspiration for doing some study on them. Mm-hmm. And what I discover is that America is at a deficit in tariff relationships with almost every country in the world.
Absolutely.
How did this happen?
Is it coming out of World War II? We had established dominance, and we are a very generous. Kind nation, and it just went too far.
Nobody recognizes this. Everybody says, "Oh, you can't do the blah, 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 blah." But when you look at every single country with whom we have commercial relationships, we are at a tariff deficit.
Yes.
And not just a minor tariff deficit, a very significant tariff deficit.
Which is a highly regressive tax on our country.
Yes.
And I think that President Trump understands that.
So why did the WTO, given the WTO, was that not equilibrated somehow in the negotiations for the WTO?
I do not know. I think we had bureaucrats. We had no one kind of from a high level saying, wait a minute, that is off kilter. You had sort of incremental adjustments. People who are bureaucrats tend to be incremental in their moves.
Right.
They don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't want to be blamed for this, that, or the other. No, you need someone basically from a high level saying, what is wrong with this picture?
But nobody's actually said that. So President Trump is the spokesperson for his administration ultimately. And, he talks about what he's going to do with tariffs, but it would be so valuable if he could say, look, everybody, let me just tell you what the situation is, where we are in the world with tariffs, and how we relate to all these other countries from a tariff perspective. I think it would be so valuable in the conversation.
I agree. And it would be, he would be reinforcing this idea. I am protecting the average consumer in the U.S. This is very regressive. I think one of the things he's doing, art of negotiation, I'm sure there are other things that he wants from countries behind the scenes that are part of each one of these deliberations. So there might be wisdom in what seems to be a chaotic situation.
I know we often say that about him, that there could be wisdom behind it. Sometimes I sometimes find myself believing that, and sometimes I'm questioning it, because I think it's such a clear fact that, if we could somehow publicize this, and maybe this is worth writing about and putting in paper, because when I started doing this investigation, I was staggered because, I think of myself as understanding some of these economic things, but I had no idea, none at all.
It's years and years of incrementalism.
Yes.
And you've got both President Trump and Elon Musk saying, wait a minute.
Right.
There's something really wrong here.
Yes.
And, just even the WTO, I mean, and China has flourished because of the WTO. And
because of ignoring the WTO within the WTO.
Within the WTO, yes. But I think even there, I think while it's been deleterious to the United States, our manufacturing base has been gutted.
Right.
And, at least cut in half as a percent of GDP if you look at manufacturing, whether it's employment or output. But now that all of these new technologies are flourishing, robotics and all kinds of automation, AI, I think we're going to leapfrog the rest of the world as President Trump brings more manufacturing back here. I think our productivity as a nation is going to be much higher and will grow much more rapidly than otherwise would have been the case. So we've been paying. The WTO started about 25 years ago, and now that pendulum went way too far. Now I think the payback is we will get to leapfrog every other nation. They're kind of stuck with their infrastructure.
Right.
We can now, we can leap into the new world, humanoid robots of all kinds, especially given the low rate of unemployment and the demographics. I think it's a good time for this to happen.
Cathie, I have, since acquiring my various Tesla vehicles,
yes,
I've taken to the road, for my entire life has been flying.
Yes.
C2B was my address for many, many, many years. But I drive now. And I drive everywhere, as much as I can, everywhere I go. And so I've been across the country many times in the last couple of years. And I see a very different part of America than we see when we get off planes and go into cities and, go to our conferences, go to our meetings. It's not that good.
Right.
And, I think that the opportunity to get some of these people active in the economy, far more active than they're able to be in these remote, not even remote, in these smaller towns and off the, not in the major cities. I think the opportunity is there because I think there's one area that we failed in this country, and that's these people, these working people who have lost all these manufacturing facilities and so on. And so there's gigantic human capital opportunities.
Absolutely. Huge unlock. If you listen to Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio, what he's doing, he gave someone a tour through parts of Ohio that, were the industrial parts and how they're rejuvenating. Steve Case and his Revolutions Fund also funding venture capital away from the big cities. Right. I mean, we're certainly trying to do that here in St. Petersburg, the Tampa Bay region, and I think governors are going to start competing. You get Vivek Ramaswamy out there saying, beating the drum. It's going to impact other governors. And we know Governor DeSantis here.
The state of Florida has been fantastic.
Huge. He's so focused on bringing startups into Florida and really taking that mantle away from California. He's very competitive to the point where I think in his budget there are some ideas that we've been working with his team on that may make it through in terms of tax credits for startups who don't need the tax credits, of course, but they can sell them off, which is very common in real estate.
Right.
now thinking about the same thing when it comes to innovation. And there is so much opportunity because we've never seen 15 technologies evolving at the same time the way they are. 5 major innovation platforms: robotics, energy storage, AI, blockchain technology, and multi-omic sequencing. We are so privileged to be living in this time. And I think as investors, and we were just talking about it this morning, this is so deflationary, but deflation in a good sense. Yes. You cut prices, you get more of it. And I think the challenge for investors is to figure out, okay, where is there going to be so much deflation, so much competition, some of it coming out of China? China's trying to pivot into this innovation age to get out of its property meltdown and the deflationary bust that's taking place there. So I think that's the trickiest thing we're trying to understand and navigate.
Right. And I come from Africa. So I was born and brought up in South Africa. And Africa is in a terrible state. I mean, for the most part, it's not necessarily even enjoying the last revolution, let alone this revolution. I think it has the opportunity to leapfrog, but I think, and it's one of the few areas of the world left where actually the population may be growing and not
Yes.
declining.
Absolutely. When we are examining the convergence between blockchain technologies and AI or AI agents, Africa is, we did a podcast, a Bitcoin brainstorm, where we featured, his name is Roast Beef. He's one of the developers around the Lightning Network. And this was, I'm going to say 2 years ago. Already, this was just a gleam in the eye, this idea, how is this convergence going to take place? He said, oh no, the gig economy in Africa is on steroids because of this convergence. And so you're right, leapfrogging. And I also think AI agents, this comes back to education, you can have your own tutor and learn in 2 weeks what might be taught in the classroom over a full year if you're passionate about a topic and want to devour it. So I think there is that passion in Africa. We have to encourage it more.
Yeah, and so that brings me back to the passion that your father brought from Ireland.
Yes.
And, you had some questions about his education and what they were, but clearly if he wasn't a learned man, if he wasn't a book-learned man, he clearly had within him this desire, this ambition.
Absolutely. And America is where he was going to be able to live out a dream. And the dream was he loved technology. Yeah. And he didn't have the background, but he went into the Irish Army when he was 17, a little before maybe the time he should have. Both of his parents had died. He was very young. And that's where he got a taste of the electronic age. And then one of his half-brothers invited him to New Jersey to help with his trucking company. He was drafted immediately and went into the Air Force, which was fantastic. Wow. Because, again, you're right. My father, he read everything he could. He is such a learner. Unfortunately, he has stage 4 dementia right now, but he's 98 years old, and he called this his second childhood because he didn't have very much of a first childhood. Mm-hmm. So God bless him. But yes, he was a voracious reader, and he took all kinds of correspondence courses. That's what they called them at the time. And constantly, and became a design engineer and one of the recognized experts in, I'm going to say the world, because he would be sent to locations we would not be allowed to know where he was. And he was the troubleshooter for And yet, because he didn't have that education, today he would have been heralded. Back then, big discrimination. Yes, he needed, the numbers, G whatever, some government designation, and he never could get above a certain hurdle, even though his work took him there. Right. His education just wouldn't let him go.
Yeah, that was I remember that in coming up, finding those people who didn't have the letters behind their names, but they were the go-to guys.
Yes.
For a particular. Yeah, I remember that very well. And in the times when there was such formality behind, the structures, the power structures, and the work structures.
I wish Peter Thiel had been, doling out the fellowships in my father's time. My father would have gotten one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a miracle age we live in, and it's very interesting for us to reflect back to the age we came, because we both come from quite similar backgrounds in some respects and from similar times.
Yes.
But, mavericks arise in every age and have arisen in every age. We talked about Edison, and now we talk about Elon. And Elon's in this very strange time right now, and he's really, he's probably risen to the very top of maverickhood you can
absolutely.
Reach. How do you feel about his future, him personally, in this very exposed position and moving forward?
I think he is what we call the maestro of the convergences among
Yes.
technologies that are taking place today. And the key is data. And Larry, we on Brainstorm, and I'm just so happy you join us on our Brainstorm each week, because you add such an important dimension to it. Not only the experience, but you're willing to disagree, which is the most important thing that can happen during a brainstorm, right?
Well, my parents wouldn't be so happy about that, but yes.
No, I bet they. Oh, yeah, I'll bet they are very happy now. So we've watched him and think about all the different data sources he is generating in his own companies, including Neuralink. So that gets into multiomics data and this convergence between neural networks, which are patterned after the brain, so he's involved in all of these companies that are not only spewing out orthogonal kinds of data that no one else has. It's probably why I love Grok 3 right now. I mean, it's my go-to for everything.
Yep.
So he understands that proprietary data is going to be the secret to success, besides deep domain expertise and a healthy respect for and understanding of AI and how powerful it is becoming and how quickly it is happening. So I think you might say he's getting access to, some people fear, all kinds of data in the government. And I don't think that's happening, but he will learn about data that is going to help the United States from a competitive point of view. In this AI revolution, he'll know how to activate that data. That's the important thing. It's just dead in some archive.
Absolutely.
And he will, Brian Romley, who's on our Brainstorm as well, he's very focused on all of the data that we're losing if we don't activate it. I really think that Elon understands that as well.
Yeah. I mean, talk about first principles. He absolutely does. It just reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday with my colleague Farzad, who said to me, "We've sucked up all this data in the internet. What is there left?" And I said to him, "Farzad, the internet isn't 1/10 of the data in the world. Not even it's such a microscopic portion of the real data that exists."
Yes.
Cathie, I think people now will have a very real sense of just how much of a maverick you are, and I want to thank you very much and tell you how appreciative we all are, me and I know all my audience and all my colleagues, for what you're doing. You're making a very big difference to our lives, and I think to the lives of all of us in the United States.
Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt. Real quick, Cathie and Larry thought they were completely done with the interview, and then they kept talking for another half hour. They had no idea we were rolling, and then halfway through, they're like, "Man, I wish we were rolling." Guess what? We were. So the coolest stuff I've ever heard from Cathie. Make sure you stick around for the follow-on conversation right now.
Oh my goodness, it's my honor and privilege. If there's any maverick thing that we're doing in the financial services world, it is, first of all, 11 years ago, putting an active equity ETF into what everybody thought was a passive wrapper. And so we certainly changed minds on that. It's only taken 10 years, but others are following pretty rapidly now. And I think this notion that, the benchmarks are not the altars we should be worshiping. Not that we should worship any idols at all, but they have become idols in our world. And sure, tried and true works for many industries that are not going to change very much. But I think all industries are about to transform because of all of the technologies that are evolving. And so really hugging benchmarks, which is what has happened to our markets, is, I think, going to deliver subpar returns moving forward. And, the burden of proof is on us, to be sure, because while pre-COVID, we were doing fine. Then we blew up over COVID and boom and bust. And, the supply chain, supply shocks, just, interest rate shocks. I think we're moving back to the pre-COVID kind of status quo, if there is such a thing, meaning innovation is evolving and accelerating. And our portfolios are chock full of, the winners, we believe, in the future, which are, for the most part, Tesla's in there now. Palantir has finally entered. So a few are in there, and it's not like the benchmarks will be left behind entirely, but they will not be able to gravitate towards the new world the way we have. And again, I'll end by saying, well, everyone's moved in that direction, which is benchmarks, passive, benchmark sensitivity. And so everyone's there. If we're right, they'll have to start moving in our direction. And we're certainly looking forward to that.
And that's exactly the same. It's a repeat of your story from your youth, when you came out. And so, I want to thank you very much. And it's so inspiring to be here at ARC and to talk to you. So for me, it's, been a very, very privileged moment.
Oh, thank you. It's been delightful for me. And I'm very happy to get to know you better, Larry, because you are contributing so much to our brainstorm, and most importantly, wisdom, and your knowledge, which gives you the conviction to disagree when we need to be challenged. So thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Cathie.
Oh, pleasure.
Appreciate it so
Thank you.
much.
Yeah.
I think we went over in time a little bit.
Oh, that's okay.
I think we're okay.
No, actually, we did very well.
Okay, I was a little worried about the time.
Yeah. Was that okay?
Great. That was awesome.
You liked it?
It flowed really well. Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things is just hearing your background, Cathie, and how similar it feels to now. I think that's one of the conviction you had like my thing is how do you gain the confidence to go against the grain as confidently as you do?
Yeah.
Like where have you gained that?
Yeah.
You know,
It started back, Art Laffer, and I'm so glad we got to feature him. He's going to be so happy to hear what you said about Nobel Prize. I have been saying that to him.
But it's a puzzle to me. It's been a puzzle to me for like not 20 years, maybe 14 years.
He's a lightning rod, like he's not one of the, the equivalent of bureaucrats who just doesn't ruffle feathers. He ruffles feathers, and he's known for being a conservative, for sure, but he has worked with the Kennedy family.
But he's only conservative because conservatives have glommed to his ideas. He's not actually conservative. He's actually quite loose thinking. He's quite
absolutely. If a Democrat or a Republican is willing to listen to his point of view, he'll throw his support behind that person. Yeah. So, in fact, who was it? The governor of California who went out with Linda Ronstadt. What's his name? Jerry Brown.
Yes.
Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown ran for, he was going to run for president on a flat tax. And Art was right there behind him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have been fantastic?
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because, when you think about it, economic policy could be such a liberating forcing function in our economy.
Yes.
And, Reagan did it, and Maggie Thatcher. Thatcher's a great hero of mine because I come from South Africa, so the English world was bigger in our calculus than perhaps the American world. Mm-hmm. But it would be so incredible to have that forcing function, and yet we can't seem to get beyond this income tax because it was so successful for government.
Yes.
In the 50, 70 years of its practice, that it's just one of those things that's impossible. It's like this WTO thing. Somebody's going to have to write up and say, guys, it's not normal. The American situation as far as tariffs are concerned is not normal.
Yes.
Well, it's the same for the tax. This tax regime, an income tax regime, is not normal.
It's not normal. It's not normal.
No.
And he talks about Greenland and Canada, and he's making, so people are wondering, okay, what should I pay attention to? Each of these is more outrageous than the other one.
Yeah.
But what I find curious about this time is you don't hear him talking about cutting tax rates, but I think that is the sleeper here.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's the sleeper. I hope so too. I hope so too.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do know that Art Laffer is in contact with President Trump. And
that's good.
Yes, it's very good. And he was in the first administration.
Yeah.
So Trump got our corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%. Think about that.
Huge.
How did he get it? So that was for corporations. He's now focused on making sure the right demographic, that he's not favoring the wealthy. Well, those 3 tax cuts are not, or tax eliminations, which is really amazing. But I do think it's behind the scenes they're working on this. And when the market figures this out, I think the market will go crazy.
Yeah, I think, the key criticism I would essay against Trump is that he doesn't explain the intellectual underpinnings for his policies. He just puts the most outrageous positioning of that policy in people's face.
But there is a method there, because I don't think Putin would treat him with the respect that he does because he doesn't know what this quote unquote crazy man is going to do to Russia.
Right.
Or to China or to Iran.
I understand that's the theory. I understand it, but the intellectual in me would prefer to have the intellect.
But maybe our role, your role, my role,
Is to explain.
is to delineate.
Yeah.
And because if you think about the sound bites on mass media, you know, that's for mass media. And they don't care about this particular, you know, well, look at the 250% tax that, you know, the Canadians would have to pay on our milk. Now, maybe milk, maybe eggs, I don't know, maybe, since that's so basic, maybe we should do that.
You know, you just sparked an idea in my head. You know how we used to have these For Dummies books?
Yes.
We need a sort of for intellectuals.
That's good.
I mean, he goes straight to the dummy level.
Yeah.
We need to explain to the intellectuals, guys, there's really a great deal of, you know, intellectual rigor behind this, and this is the explanation. Give them all the high
I think
words
that's
they
a
need.
great idea.
Yeah. Maybe we should partner.
Collaborate on that.
I'll write a little outline and see how you think about that. Yeah.
I think it would be fantastic.
Okay.
I do.
I will.
I do. And I think they need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they need
do
it.
I'll do it.
Because what they're trying to do is break through all of the noise.
Yeah.
And most people are not going to sit there for an intellectual argument.
Yeah. He throws the bomb, but behind that bomb is this deep intellectual thought, and here it is for the intellectuals.
And, you know, again, art will not work in any administration. Well, he's 85 now, and he wants to go out, talk about Nobel Prize winning. He is going to countries. He's working in Argentina, El Salvador, Suriname, and some countries, I think in Africa as well. Anyone who will invite him, he is giving back and trying to help countries.
The age of 85.
Yes. And one of the most interesting things is, and you may have heard me say this on Brainstorm, but, you know, when we had Art review our paper on Bitcoin in 2015, because it's an economic argument. It's all money. And he's not only an expert on fiscal policy, but also monetary policy. And speaking of Nobel Prize winners, Robert Mundell won a Nobel Prize for his monetary theory. That was Art's mentor. So, but he tore the paper apart, and which was great. I loved that because I knew it was going to be intellectually rigorous from an economist's point of view. But at the end, he said it was almost as though he's going through a catharsis now of, you know, he's becoming younger because he said, this is what I've been waiting for since we closed the gold window in 1971. The reason that hit him so hard is he was in the Nixon administration. He was the head of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and he was against closing the gold window. And he made it known. I think that's why he's never been a part of another administration. He just offers advice for free. And so I think he feels that Bitcoin will vindicate that massive error, or not vindicate, will start to overturn that massive error. And he can be a part of the movement that does that. So he's done events at Bitcoin Park in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where he lives.
I didn't realize it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. He is so excited about Bitcoin. Rules-based, private,
Yeah. I can see
global
Right.
monetary system.
that. Yeah, it would align very closely. Yeah. And maybe he should have invented it. You know, the Satoshi thing, the miracle of the Satoshi thing is just insufficiently explored.
Yes. Oh, I know. There is, I don't know if you've heard this, but there is a hypothesis out there that Jack Dorsey is Satoshi. And
I've heard that, but
yeah.
I kind of discount it. Why do I discount it? I don't know why I discount it. I think because of Jack's demeanor. I don't know why. It's possible. It's possible. I mean,
there's so Matt Siegel. He actually used to work on my team at Alliance Bernstein. He had been a Bloomberg journalist, and he's done some investigational work and is coming up with some very interesting coincidences. So,
which means that so the golden wallet, the owner is still alive in that case, which is quite an interesting situation.
If it were true. If it were true.
Yeah. Wow.
If it were true.
Wow.
That'd be pretty mind-blowing.
Wow, it would be.
Yeah.
Gosh. Well, I tell you, this has been a dream for me. ARC has become a huge emblem in my mind of the times we're living in. And, I'm so convinced of the thesis. I'm so committed to the thesis that, for me, this is a very important, what is the word? When one goes to a religious shrine, it's been a moment.
Oh, this has been wonderful for us. It's been wonderful. And we just have to keep doing this together. Yeah. We do. Yeah. There are so many people who believe that we'll fail. And yet I am as confident now that these technologies are going to transform everything as I was at, that very early stage in my career, that, interest rates and inflation were going to come down. And I think the economic roots, being able to understand the power behind lower tax rates, increasing productivity, how innovation's the new creation.
I'll give you a little bit of wisdom from my 60, 70 years in innovation. Everything takes longer and then it suddenly takes less time.
Right.
It's like, it's just not happening. It's just not happening. And then when it happens at such warp speed that you don't even realize that you're in the midst of the change.
Well, what's happening, just to give you a sense of how crazy things are out there, there are companies, CRISPR Therapeutics in our portfolio, that are curing disease.
Yep.
And when we talk about it, the traditional world actually is shorting it. Why? They think cures
is a bad thing.
Bad business. You lose the daily annuity, the pill and our multi-omics team with the leadership of Brett Winton has concluded, and you can see it in our Big Ideas 2025, has concluded that cures could be worth 20 times more because you avoid the patent cliff.
Yeah.
And they're developing so much more quickly than old therapies that these patent lives up to 21 years are going to be worth so much more.
Yeah.
So I find it, so the conviction we had about Tesla in early days of ARC, that's the conviction we have around multi-omics now. And the disbelief around it is worse than the disbelief was around production hell with Tesla.
You speak to Kennedy, Robert Kennedy about it?
You know what? I have met him in conjunction with crypto. Because that's where he was placing a lot of emphasis in the day, in terms of getting to know the investment community. We would love to do a podcast with him.
I think it's probably the right time to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
It would be awesome to be able to make that happen.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that should be the next objective.
You know what I've also decided? Innovation keeps people young. I cannot believe that you were in high school in the 60s. Well, I just can't believe it.
I'm in my 80th year.
This is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
You look amazing. You look amazing. You look amazing.
Well, I'm significantly overweight. My wife will tell you. But yes, I mean, I feel as young as I felt. You know, I retired 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. And my son runs that company today. I'd actually sold it. It was my last venture. And he runs that company. And he asked me just the other day, why did you retire? I said, I was getting over the top. He said, no, you retired before, you know, and so we had this whole argument. But I guess it just, you know, intellectually keeping active is really the key. Mm-hmm. But you know, age does things to you. Yeah.
Well, I don't know though. I mean, obviously it does. That's what goes without saying. But in terms of synapses firing, all of the new ideas and the convergences, you know, the connections, the connective tissue,
right?
You know, that we are searching to understand. I actually think it's helping our brains, that's critically important. Our brains stay young.
To God's ears.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I feel it.
Well, that's fantastic.
There's nothing that excites me more than saying, wait a minute. I think I just connected some dots here that no one's connected before. Let's work with that, analyst. Let's go down, even if it's a rabbit hole. It's okay.
Yeah, it's amazing to see you and brainstorm. I'm amazed at Brett and very impressed and very grateful for him and his leadership in the team. But to see you steer your team and from the back almost rather than from the front, it's very inspiring.
Oh,
I have
thank
to say.
you.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that's my role in that, and it is really because you know the brains we have here. Yeah. Oh my gosh,
amazing.
Oh my gosh, one of the things that has changed in our business is that the younger people know so much more than the most seasoned people, certainly about technology. And they are teaching us. Yeah. And it's up to us. Part of our role is actually to make connections, you know, based on, you know, how technologies have evolved over time. Yes. Just bring that into the conversation and see if it's relevant at all, you know, and be willing to go. I mean, I don't know, on Brainstorm, I'm willing to say something and then just have Brett bat me down and then have you take the other side of that. And it's like, yes, you know, so that's part of the other brain, you know, wave stimulation, I think.
Yeah, sometimes it's like the old farts competing with the youngsters. I mean, it's very interesting. Do you get to Austin at all?
From time to time, yes.
I'd love to introduce you to the folks at Capital Factory in Austin.
Capital Factory has come to our attention recently.
It's a very exciting place. Josh Baer founded it. He's an very interesting person. I have in the can an episode of the Maverick Mind on him, and I'd love you to watch that just to get a sense of Josh. But it is it's a playground, a Disney World for founders. Uh-huh. And in Austin, and what he's done there is quite remarkable. But it would be so interesting for your team to meet some of those folks and talk to them, because there's a lot of cross-pollination opportunity there. You know, they're not as rigorous, and they don't have the philosophy of innovation that you all have, and they don't have the rigor of the study and the actual, you know, work that you guys do. But there are a bunch of startups around a lot of what is happening in particular space and robotics and AI. And so there would just be a lot of value, and it's a wonderful space. So one of the things he does is just have the space that everybody can be together.
Yeah.
And so it would be an
That's
introduction.
great. Oh, it would be fun.
Yeah, I'd love to make that introduction.
And we should introduce him to Brainstorm.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it would be very important.
Yeah.
Austin's quite a happening place.
Oh, yes.
But I have to say, Farzad and I arrived here, both of us the first time in St. Pete. We were blown away how beautiful this place is.
It's so beautiful. Heaven on earth.
And, the people seem to be so open and friendly.
Absolutely.
It's not like Florida somehow. This is not like being in Florida.
It isn't. And I think part of the reason is this was the backwash for Tampa.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it was not a nice place 20 years ago.
Really?
It was not nice at all. And I mean, drugs, homeless. I mean, it was very difficult place, and it has transformed, and it's young. There's a university here. It's vibrant. There's a grassroots kind of artistic movement.
Right.
So a lot of art here. I'm sure you've seen all the restaurants and bars and lounges and sports places to celebrate the teams that are in this area, which are quite good.
Yeah, we went to Teak last night, the restaurant out on because we were hoping to see the launch of, which was scrubbed, of the astronauts. It was scrubbed, but it was so pleasant and the people were all terrific. And Farzad kept saying to me, I've got to bring my family here. I've got to bring my family. What decided you to come to St. Petersburg? What was there?
Well, so Art Laffer was saying to me, as soon as we hit our hockey stick, he said, you are going to be taxed to death in New York.
Yes.
And then it started really hitting us, such that, 60% all in. And we were saying, there's a better way. So we went to no or low tax states just to look around. And 3 places in Florida, Miami, Jacksonville, and Tampa, St. Pete. Austin, we considered Nashville, Charleston.
I'm hoping you're going to say the Raleigh-Durham Triangle, but okay.
We did for a moment. We came here and we thought Tampa was it. And we had to go to St. Pete the next day because they had planned a whole day for us. But we thought Tampa was it. We went nonetheless. And as we were going across Central Avenue, it was the vibe, and it was the part of this region that needed us.
Right.
Where we could make a difference.
Yeah.
And so we are. Our ARC's research, made age appropriate for middle school, is throughout the science curriculum in middle school here.
That's fantastic.
And I don't know if or how much we had to do with the system being upgraded from a B school system to an A school system. I would say they had a lot of other programs that really did catapult, but we just happened to be here when that happened. So,
is there a leadership that's making that happen, that's catalyzing this?
I think the business leaders and the political leaders are, Kellen Carter, who's our corporate counsel and chief compliance officer, I call him our ambassador. He's gotten to know everyone, and he's in leadership circles now in the community. They want new ideas. They want, we would never be able to make this kind of difference in New York or elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And yet they welcomed us with open arms, and we partnered with the city on the ARC Innovation Center, and that's where we will start our early stage venture effort. The startups will be housed there. So, we are trying to, and we are making a difference in this community.
Yeah, Florida really interested me. I came down to the All In conference a couple of years ago. They had it in Miami Beach, and we were in Miami as well. Met the mayor of Miami. Mm-hmm. What an incredible guy he is. So, and I'm going to try and lure him onto the podcast. Such a dynamic young man. I know he even tried to run for president for a moment.
Yes, for a moment.
Yeah. But I think he's got a lot to bring to the table.
Yes.
I thought was pretty impressive.
Yes, yes. You know, Florida was the butt of jokes for years and years and years. And that's, you know, we try harder is a little bit of what's going on as well. And
how's the weather in deep summer?
I am fine with it. I don't mind it at all.
Okay.
I don't. There are people who do mind it. So we have a remote policy. There are 30 floating remote days that if you want to take the worst part of summer as
take it off,
you could take it somewhere else. So we did it for that reason.
And how many are you now in ARC?
Altogether 65.
Wow.
Yes. Wow. And we're approaching 30 billion in assets under management. So
that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So, well, I think we've just begun, you know.
Yes.
I think we've
I'm
just
certain
begun.
of it. I think the era of ARC has begun, but I think it's just begun.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Love to hear you say that because I truly believe it.
I believe it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, it's
okay.
Amazing morning.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I want to give a huge shout out to David Carbutt and his team. They helped edit this video, this piece of content. He's been helping me for the last 2 years. You see the content, it's phenomenal. He does such a great job. If you want the same thing for your media business, your YouTube channel, whatever you're doing, make sure you follow the link in the description below. You'll get 10% off using my name, Farzad. I will guarantee that you will love his service. I've loved working with him and his team for the last 2 years. I can't speak more highly of anybody. Make sure you check him out. Thanks.